In October 2024, we gathered at the PASI Legislative Summit to tackle a profound and troubling question. Why do our judicial systems seemingly disregard the Constitution, leading to the fracturing of families? The issue of parental alienation has evolved into a silent epidemic, often manipulating as a powerful weapon during divorce disputes. This manipulation not only harms the relationships between parents and their children, but also inflicts emotional and psychological turmoil on the children themselves. As policymakers engage in lengthy discussions about shared parenting arrangements, child support formulas, and custody regulations, the true victims, our children, are often left on the sidelines. They face the emotional fallout of these contentious debates while their lives are dissected as if they were mere bargaining chips in legal negotiations. It is imperative that we come together as a community to advocate for the meaningful change in our family courts. We must unite to ensure that the voices of children are prioritized, fostering environments where they can thrive rather than endure the negative ramifications of adult conflicts. Their well-being should always take precedence, driving us to demand legal reforms that uphold their rights, dignity, and emotional health. Only by standing together can we hope to create a future where children are shielded from unnecessary strife and their best interests at the forefront of every decision made.
Welcome back. Mark Ludwig will be presenting on mistakes people make when attempting to pass legislation. And I have the honor of introducing my good friend. Mark has served in the political arena for over 40 years as a fundraiser, campaign manager, advisor, and candidate for U.S. Congress. After going through a custody battle, Mark gave up his political career to use his experience to help pass legislation. In the past 9 years, Mark has personally met with over 630 legislators, worked on legislation in 29 states, and played a role in helping pass shared parenting legislation in 9 states. Mark is the author of Make a Difference, The Insider's Guide to Passing State Legislation, and is a founder of Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. Please welcome Mark Ludwig.
Thanks so much, guys. All right, let me try and put this in presenter mode in a second here. But first off, I want to thank Joni and Clint and Larry and you guys for inviting me. Appreciate it. I always appreciate a chance to try and share. My goal is to always serve with the people I speak for. So Joni or Larry, if you guys have anything that you want me to add or just shoot me a chat or a text. And I can definitely do some Q&A afterwards. I always like getting the interaction going for people that have questions. But I was going to cover some basics of meeting with legislators. I know so many people in our community have never been around the political arena. And all of a sudden their kids are taken away. They're emotional. They're wanting to make a change. But they realize that the last time they knew anything about how the government works was 8th grade civics class when they were passing notes or shooting rubber bands back and forth at people and not paying attention in class. And just very fortunately, I've been in I'm 60 years old now. So I've been in the political arena for 40 years, long before I came around the shared parenting community. And finally realized that I think that was my niche, was sort of educating people on the proper methods. When I first came around the shared parenting community, when I came across it was about 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago. I did a Google search and came across the Fathers' Rights Movement. And not putting them down at all. They're a great organization. But what I saw was a lot of people doing these radical protests with all these hand-painted signs with poster boards standing on a corner that say judges are corrupt. And you and I know what that means. But the challenge is to the average person driving down the street or to a legislator, it just is a turnoff. It just looks like these people are a little unstable. And so I spent about a year studying the shared parenting community. Who's in it? What's their niche? What is their strength? What's their weakness? Are there any gaps? And finally, after about a year, I finally realized, maybe my niche is training people on how to meet with legislators. So I want to go through today just some ideas for you that will help. Oh, wait, I need to do a share screen thing, I think. Hold on here. Or, because how do I get my, oh wait, okay, let's try this. Okay, Larry, can somebody let me know? Can you guys see my little PowerPointy thing?
Yeah, we got it, Mark.
Okay, cool. All right, so now let me try and do a full screen of it. There we go. Okay. Oops. And somehow it went all the way to a few extra slides. Let me see.
Backspace.
Huh. Trying that, but it's not working. Because yeah, somehow this ended up like halfway through. I apologize. Shoot.
We all had trouble all weekend, so don't feel bad.
Oh wait, there we go. Okay, now it's showing. Okay. All right. Larry went through a lot of the background, but like I said, I don't say this to sound arrogant, but to let you know, I didn't just wake up in my basement and come up with some of these ideas. I literally have been around the political arena for 40 years, been an advisor to some pretty large campaigns, been a fundraiser, helped raise over $17 million for some of the different candidates' campaigns that I worked on. And if you become known as a fundraiser, candidates like you. And so when they get in office, they remember who you are. Met with about 620 legislators in the last 9 years, specifically on the topics of equal shared parenting. I've worked in 29 states, over 300 TV interviews, and this is just with regard to shared parenting. Some of you may have seen I was one of the main speakers for the National Association of Christian Lawmakers this year, who did accept a 50-50 rebuttal presumption as one of their model templates. Part of the Eagle-Schlafly or the Phyllis-Schlafly Eagle Council. Some of you know Phyllis was the first one, or one of the first ones in the 90s, early 90s, saying that Title IV-D was going to create a fatherless society. She was from St. Louis, and I knew her for 20 years, but unfortunately, the issue didn't affect me at that time. I had no idea how important she was and was going to be in my life as a result of her efforts. I do now sit on the ALEC HHS Model Policy Task Force Committee. I think most of you know, but that's the single largest organization of legislators in the country. There's over 2,000 either legislators or legislator chief of staffs and their aides that are a part of ALEC. And so it's the largest organization in the country that develops model policy, and then their members vote on it. And if they like what they see, then all of their members across the nation in all 50 states basically commit to following this policy. So it's kind of neat that I was just added to the task force committee. So now I have direct influence with all those legislators across the country. And I think some of you know, I spent 2 days with one of the presidential teams at Bedminster. One of my big goals is to position myself for a potential White House appointment in January if a certain candidate gets in office. So I don't say that to brag or say, ha, look at me, but just to give you an idea that I've learned a lot. I've been very fortunate to be put in positions to learn from people to find out how do they think. The most important thing when you're passing legislation is you have to put yourself in the legislator's mind to try and think of what are they thinking, not what do you think. So as you get started, most important thing is to do your research. You've got to do your research on the issue. And I think most of you in that room probably are highly educated on the issue. So I probably don't need to talk too much about that to you guys. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the shared parenting community that are newbies. They come in after 60 days and they're just, some of you have seen it. And I don't mean to put them down. Their heart's in the right place, but they're too new. They're like a child trying to teach somebody geometry. They just don't know what they're supposed to talk about at this point. So make sure you educate yourself about the issue. What I do want to talk a little bit about is educating yourself about the legislator. It's important before you go in. If you've ever followed my Facebook Lives, I normally spend hours the week before I go to DC or before I go to any capital. When I went to the ALEC meeting last in December, we had the ALEC meeting. I'm not exaggerating. I spent at least 80 to 90 hours doing my research before I went to that. All the people who I thought were going to be at this one, and I was pulling up their Facebook page, their LinkedIn page. I was doing Google searches. I wanted to find out, what were their passion issues? Almost every person who runs for office, there's one issue that says, that's the reason I'm running. For us, we've got a handful of people across the country. It's, a Jamie Flick in Pennsylvania that went through a custody battle, and that's the reason he's in the Pennsylvania legislature right now. Tom Pischke in the Senate in South Dakota. That's the reason he ran. David Castile here in Missouri. So we've got some legislators that our issue is why they ran for office. But there's a lot of others that maybe they're pro-life, maybe they're pro-choice, maybe they're Second Amendment. But it's important for you to find out what is their passion issue and how can you relate our issue to what relates to them. You want to find out about their family, about their kids. The most important part about meeting with the legislator is building that relationship with them. They're bombarded by, at the state level, could be anywhere from 50 to 100 people knocking on their door every single day that they're at the Capitol. At the federal level, if you've ever been to the Russell Building or the Hart Building, you've probably seen, hundreds and hundreds of people coming through that door every single day. I was good friends with Roy Blunt, the former senator from Missouri. His son, Governor Matt Blunt, I served on the Small Business Policy Council during that administration. And a lot of times when I go to DC, I would set up in Roy's office, and they would have a little, desk that I could use there. And sometimes I would just observe the people coming in. And the challenge is you're trying to stand out when they have 200 people bombarding them. How are they going to remember you? I promise you how they're going to remember you. You're the only one who talks about them. Everybody else was just throwing up on them with a sales pitch when they walked in. If you're the first person who asked them about their kids, about their grandkids, about their hobbies, about their passions, when you leave at night and the next day, I promise you, you're the only one they're going to remember. But to do that, you've got to do some research ahead of time on this legislator. So another thing I always recommend is you walk in the office, make sure that you're scanning the office to find out, what kind of pictures do they have. Most people in their office, they're going to have the things they're proud of. I have pictures of Levi all over the place. Obviously, that's the highlight of my life. So when you walk in an office, what pictures do they have on their desk and what do they have on their wall? That immediately tells you what are they the most proud of and what's the most important in their life. That's how you start the conversation. You're trying to build that common bond. And especially if they have kids, on our issue, it's absolutely critical that you start out talking about their kids, because now you've got a way to be able to connect our issue to their kids. When you say, hey, boy, it's neat that Tommy plays soccer there. Can you imagine what it would be like if all of a sudden you found out that you'd been served and you weren't allowed to go to Johnny's soccer game, next weekend? So you've got to relate our issue in a way that moves it from their head to their heart. You do that by scanning the office. If they're a hunter, they're going to have a head mounted on the wall. If they're a fisherman, they may have a fish mounted on the wall. So point that out. Oh man, that's a beautiful fish. I'm not a fisherman. I haven't fished since I was a kid with my grandpa. But I tell you what, if there's a picture on the wall, I want them telling me about it. Man, that's a neat fish. Where did you catch that? Who was with you when you? And I want them telling me the story, because we're connecting with each other. And I'm amazed at how many people think that's a waste of time. They want to get right to the issue. I'll just tell you, if you get right to the issue, you wasted your time in their office. If you build a relationship, they're the ones that are going to be calling you back. I'm amazed. I get calls, I think some of you know, at least once a day, every single day, 365 days a year, I get a call from a legislator somewhere across the country who just wants to bounce an idea off me. Why? Because I built a relationship. I know their kids, I know their grandkids, I know their hobbies. And if I'm a legislator, and I just even at the state level, in the state of Missouri, to give you an idea, in December, there will be about 2,000 potential bill ideas that are going to be introduced in 2025 in January. Now, they won't all be introduced, but at least they're being talked about by the legislators. In Missouri, legislators are part-time. They make $34,000 a year. So they have a full-time career in most cases, and they're doing this part-time on the side. They don't have time to research 2,000 ideas. Well, how do they learn about them? They find somebody that they know, like, and trust in their inner circle. So if there's a bill about education and they know nothing about education, but they have a neighbor who's a teacher and they like that person, they're probably going to call them up and say, hey, somebody's talking about this bill for, the education system. Can you do me a favor and take a look at this? If there's a bill about chiropractic and they have a chiropractor, they're probably going to go to their chiropractor and say, hey, somebody's emailed me this bill about chiropractic changes. Can you take a look at this? If there's a bill with kids, I promise you, they're going to have somebody that they're going to send it to that says, hey, can you take a look at this? You want to be that person so that any bill that has anything at all to do with kids, you're the one who gets that phone call. So as you go in and start meeting with them, it's important that you prepare. Never wing it. Never walk in. We're trying to make a change. You're only going to get so many meetings with legislators. And especially your first couple are critical because you're setting the template for the image that you're going to convey in that Capitol and the reputation you're going to have in the Capitol. Never wing it because they and their legislative aides that's sitting in the meeting with you are under the impression you're wasting their time. Because if you didn't take enough importance on this to prepare ahead of time, why should they think that this is an important issue? Have a plan. Know exactly what you plan to do during that meeting. You need to know what the timeline is. If they tell you, you need to have a 3-minute pitch, a 5-minute pitch, and a 10-minute pitch. And to be able to immediately pivot to know which one that you're going to give. Know what your goal is. You have to have an end game. You don't just go and ramble and ramble and ramble. At some point, you have to have a close where you look them in the eye and you say, hey, I sure have appreciated talking with you, but let me ask you a question. Would you consider being a bill sponsor for me on this bill? So make sure, like I said, that you've got some kind of a goal and then practice, practice, practice. You need to have your talk down. Some of you have seen there's videos all over YouTube of some of the testimonies. I think I've given testimonies in Senate hearings in 14 different states now. And if you watch them, you'll notice almost every one of them is pretty identical. Why? Because I've really studied, because in most Senate hearings, you get 3 minutes max to give your testimony. So every word counts. So I analyze every single word. Does this word need to be eliminated? Can this word come in? Does this sentence need to be eliminated? Could I say something with a fewer word count? And once you get it down, you practice, practice, practice to where you could almost give it in your sleep. I'm not exaggerating. Most people, if somebody could wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning from a dead sleep and say, Mark, you're on at the Senate hearing. And I could literally say, oh, Madam Chairman, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I sure appreciate you giving me, and I could go right into my spiel. You need to practice it that much. It's that important. Make sure that you dress for success. If you're going into a Capitol, it's probably not a good idea to wear a t-shirt that says all judges are corrupt. Okay. Yes, there's corrupt judges, but realize some of those judges were appointed by the person you're sitting in front of. But it's important. I don't like wearing ties. My presentation this morning, I'm here with Levi this weekend. Levi just walked across to go to the bathroom. But normally I sleep in a t-shirt and shorts. I didn't give my presentation today. I got up, I'm wearing blue jeans and no shoes, but I put a shirt on. Why? Because when you're giving a presentation, you have to convey a certain image. That when you walk in an office, you're conveying an image. And if they don't know anything about you, they're making a judgment on you based on how you look when you want to. And I want every edge I can get when they walk in that office. So, I wear very plain business looking suits. I don't wear flashy suits or trendy suits. That's a turnoff to most legislators. Go into the Russell Building or the Hart Building. It's always the best. What I tell people, if you want to be effective with a legislator, go to the Russell Building or the Hart Building in Washington, D.C., or the Durkin Building. But the Senate side is much better than looking at the House side. And watch how the professional lobbyists dress. Watch how they look. Watch how they carry themselves. I always only wear a dark blue or a dark gray suit. I always wear a lighter colored shirt and a very simple tie. I don't wear a flashy looking tie. I want the attention on my issue. So, and then obviously good hygiene. Make sure that you comb your hair. If you have facial hair, make sure it's very neatly combed and trimmed. Bring a notebook, never a briefcase. If you walk in with a briefcase or something like that, you look like you're a salesperson. Getting to the gatekeeper, I'm amazed at how many people think that the legislative assistant is not an important person, and they almost like snuff them, like, you know, hey, you little peon, I'm too good for you. Realize, guys, that gatekeeper has a morning debrief with that legislator every single day. And on most days, they also have an end of the day debrief. They were probably hired specifically by that legislator, which means they have a lot of influence. You've got one time in their office. If you've got a great relationship, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times an entire legislative session. But that gatekeeper has every day, anytime they want, they can get a hold of them. You want to make a friend with that gatekeeper because they can become your ally behind the scenes. They can also, though, become your enemy, just so you know. Make sure that you confirm the time and the clock with the gatekeeper. Hey, how much time have they allotted? Never run over. Never, never, never. This is a big mistake I see people make is they get so excited about their issue and they're told you have 10 minutes and they spend 20 minutes and they'll walk out in the hallway and say, man, I won them over. They gave me 20 minutes, even though they told me I only had 10. No, you think you won, but I promise you what happens. They go back and they look at their schedule and they realize they're 10 minutes behind schedule. And to a legislator, if you're 10 minutes behind schedule in the morning, you're not going to get caught up that whole day. So you won the battle, but you lost the war. Yes, they enjoyed the time while you were in their office. But the lingering they thought they have is, I can't have that person back in my office because even though I enjoyed talking with them, I don't have 20 minutes when I only gave them 10. So you'll find, and we have in Missouri, we have certain legislators that have literally told me they won't let certain people in their office anymore because they said every time they run 5, 10, 20 minutes over schedule, I'm just not giving them any time at this point. Realize the relationship is more important than trying to impress them with how much you know. So that's why I said, and a good acronym is FORM: family, occupation, recreation, and message. So I always start with the FOR. I ask them about their family. What do they do outside? Are they an insurance agent? Are they a stockbroker? Are they a teacher? Recreation. Did they like to hunt? Do they like to fish? What type of music do they listen to? And then M is for the message. But you didn't earn the right to talk about our message if you didn't find out one of the first 3. Find out, what do they know? The first opening question I usually ask a legislator, I don't immediately start talking. I want to find out where are they coming from. So I don't say, hey, let me tell you about parental alienation. Let me tell you about the family court system. My opening line, after I get done building the friendship, the relationship, my pivot point is, hey, Senator Lemke, let me ask you, what's your knowledge of the family court system? Have you ever had anyone in your family deal with the family court system? And then I listen. And I want to find out where they're coming from. You will be surprised how many people have been through it, have a relative that went through it, have a neighbor, a coworker, someone they went to church, and they will start telling you. But if you don't ask that question, you start, boom, giving a sales pitch, you just missed out on a very key ingredient. Okay, so then you're going to get into a 30 or 45-second story. This is probably the biggest mistake I see people do. I see people walk in and spend 10, 15 minutes telling every detail of their own personal story. And yes, I realize there's a lot of horrible stories. I have a horrible story. But a legislator, and remember this, hear me now, remember me later. But remember this, a legislator will not change a law because of one story for one individual. They represent an entire state. So the more you emphasize your story, the more they're thinking you need a referral to an attorney or a counselor, not a law changed. What you need to do is plant the seed with your story and then pivot into, but I tell you what, my story is not unique. I promise you there's 1,000 stories just like me in our own state. So always remember that. The more you're trying to impress them with how bad your story is, I'll just tell you, coming from somebody who sat and spent thousands of hours in legislators' offices listening to these stories and in the governor's office, I'll just tell you that turns a legislator off. They're looking at how many people does this issue affect in my state? So to do that, you've got a 30 to 45 second, and you got to practice this over and over and over. Don't give details of how you got out of the car and walked to the right side, and they kicked a can when they walked across, and they sent me a nasty text before I got out of the car. We don't want that. We want bullet points. Tell me the brief summary, the Cliff Notes version in 30 or 45 seconds, and then immediately pivot using the phraseology. But I'll tell you what, my story isn't unique. I promise you, you've got hundreds of constituents in your district that are going through exactly what I just described tonight. And then that's when you start getting into the actual message. Now, in the message, it's important to convey a feeling. And I always recommend people, once again, do your research, study. The best people to study are Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Now, I'm about as far on the right side of the aisle as you can get, but I believe you can always learn something from everybody. And I'll tell you what, as a conservative, I'll tell you, Republicans are horrible. We always get into facts, figures, details. We could tell you every, let me tell you about inflation, 4.98274%. And on eggs, it's 13.872%. Nobody cares about that. What they care about is the feeling of what is it like to buy groceries. And if you study YouTube clips of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama doing interviews or doing press conferences, they were geniuses when somebody asked a question, and instead of just giving a dissertation of facts and figures, they made that story hit home and they brought it from the head to the heart. And they said, let me tell you, I was just at a kitchen table with a family the other day, and I looked up and I saw their pantry. There was nothing in their pantry. And I asked them, and they told me, well, we just lost our job and we don't have the money. And they made that. That's what you've got to do. You've got to convey that feeling. Make sure that you talk at a 5th grade level. Do not use insider terms. For me, the main bill that I always work on is a 50-50 rebuttable presumption. That means nothing to 95% of the legislators who have no law background. So talk at the 5th grade level. If I ever do use a term, and if you've ever heard me on the radio or seen me on TV, if I do mention it, I'll always say, hey, I'm working for what's known as a 50-50 rebuttable presumption. But in simple terms, what that means is a child should be presumed to have equal access to both of their parents unless there's an overriding reason why one of those parents is unfit, unwilling, or unable. So you've got to dumb down your terms, especially if you ever use the word parental alienation. I'll just tell you, 95% of the legislators have absolutely no clue what that means. So be careful using that term. If you do, you better make sure that you describe and give examples of what that means. Use positive messaging with legislators. That's why I said, I'm amazed at the people that want to protest outside of Capitol. I'll just tell you, most legislators, that's a turnoff, because their attitude is, if you'll protest in a public setting like that, if you don't like me, then you'll protest in front of my office someday. So I don't want to take the chance. I'm just never letting you in my office to discuss anything with you. So always use positive messaging. Realize too, always remember why you're doing this. Okay? I'm not doing this for a trophy. And I'm amazed every once in a while people come in my living room, and I've passed in, like I said, I've been a part, sometimes a bigger part, sometimes a small part, but 10 pieces of legislation in 9 states that have something to do with equal shared parenting. Some of them were a 50-50 rebuttable presumption. Some were facts, findings, and conclusions. And I've got copies of those bills that I was given by some of the governors, and people walk in my place and they're like, where's the bills? I thought you'd have those posted on the wall. No, I didn't do it for the trophy. I did it to make a difference in the kids' lives. And every once in a while I'll go, and we have this in Missouri every once in a while, where people are talking about, hey, this is my bill. Guys, you got the wrong focus. The focus is always on the kids, not on the trophy. So always remember that, because otherwise you get infighting of groups saying, no, this is my bill. This is my bill. I get people every once in a while that'll talk about, my bill is 50-50. Guys, the 50-50 bill concept was around a lot longer than Mark Ludwig, a lot longer. So, well, not as long as me, I'm 60, but before I came around the shared parenting community. So I always correct the interviewer. It's in my bill. It's a bill for the kids. Use visuals for data and don't overwhelm them. Like I said, some people love statistics. If you get somebody who's an accountant, an engineer, somebody like that, I love data. In college, I got 3 degrees, and one of those that I was originally going to go for, ironically, I didn't. I got marketing, finance, and management. But going for business degrees, I love statistics. But you're snoozing the average legislator if you don't have a graphic showing. So you need to have some kind of a bar chart or graph showing and illustrating the data that you're using. Always remember to don't impress, relate. You're not trying to impress them with how much you know. You're building a friendship so they enjoy being around you. And then, as I said, read the room 2 ways. Number one, to read, what do they like? Who do they, what type of, you can usually tell. And normally they'll have a picture of them with a president. So you'll get an idea which side of the aisle they're on. And they'll give you an idea of how to talk. I always talk to a Republican different than I talk to a Democrat. Republicans are very interested in family values, family unity, due process, constitutionality. Democrats are always interested in equality and fairness. So even though I'm talking about the same issue, I'm presenting it in a different manner that will relate to something that they can enjoy. But also read the room on feedback. If they're constantly looking at their watch or looking at their phone or checking text messages, you've lost them. They're not interested. We had a situation in Missouri a couple of years ago. There were 4 of us that walked into this senator's office, and we were meeting with him for the first time. And this one guy is just rambling, and literally he was obviously trying to impress with how much he knew. He was using more syllables in words than I've ever heard in my life, and just going on and on and on and on and on and on. And he kept rambling. And at one point, the senator stood up, and immediately the chief of staff stood up, and his other assistant stood up. And just so you know, if the senator and their chief of staff stand up, that means all rise. That means the meeting's over. Get up. And so the other 3 of us, we all stand up, and this guy just keeps rambling and rambling and rambling. And then we get out in the hallway afterwards, and he says, "You know what? I could tell he liked what I was saying. I made an impression on him." And the other 3 of us looked at each other like, "Were you even in the same meeting? You lost it for us." So read the room, look at the feedback, watch how their body language is. And I talked about this, the close. This is the most important thing. What is your end game goal? Are you trying to get them to be a sponsor? Are you trying to get them to support it? Are you meeting with the Speaker of the House to get them to assign it to a Judiciary Committee or a Family Services Committee? Are you meeting with the chair of the committee to get their commitment that they're going to actually have a hearing on it and actually have a vote in their hearing? So know exactly and specifically what is the goal that you're hoping to accomplish by this meeting, and then ask for that goal and be very clear and direct. They're used to that. Some people may have a little phlegmatic personality, and you're almost afraid of getting a no, so you don't want to ask. Guys, you wasted the meeting if you don't ask the question. So you've got to be bold enough to say, "Hey, boy, I sure enjoyed talking with you. I know you said you only had 10 minutes, so I want to make sure that we get out of your office. But I want to ask you a question. Would you be willing to help support us by sponsoring this bill if I could help you move it along this session?" And then shut up and wait. Don't keep going on and on. I love going to different states and meeting and bringing people to some of these meetings and seeing how they interact. And I'm always amazed that sometimes people are so afraid of getting a no during that silence period that they want to interrupt and keep selling. No, once you ask the question, you wait until they give you an answer. And let me just tell you, almost every legislator will do this. They will start out with the negatives first. Almost always, probably 90 to 95%. Don't interrupt them. In most cases, in almost every one, they will come around with a positive. So if they start out, if you say, "Hey, I was wondering if you would be a sponsor," and their first words out of their mouth are, "Well, I do have to make sure that I look out for all of my constituents. So I'm going to want to meet with the domestic violence organizations, and I'm going to meet with the Bar Association." And some people interrupt them. "Well, let me tell you how bad they are, and they just make money off this thing, and that's how they earn a living." No, just let them keep talking. And then I want to hear from my constituents. I want to find out people that might be affected by this bill if it passed. Well, remember, still let them talk it. And they'll come around and they'll say, but you know what? I do like the concept. I do think that this is something that can make a change. So let them keep going. And then if they don't come to complete close, but normally they will give you a yes or no. They won't just leave it hanging. Most legislators, unless they're a freshman, if they've been around, especially if they've been around for 3 or 4 terms, they will definitely give you an answer always at the end of that. So make sure that you're quiet and you wait for your answer. One thing I did want to touch on is finding the right sponsor. A big mistake I see people make is they meet with their own state rep or any state rep that gives them the time of day, and that's the one they want to go for a sponsor right away. Guys, I'll tell you what, one of the most important decisions you're going to make when you go to a Capitol is who is your bill sponsor going to be. You get a bad bill sponsor, and I don't care how good your bill is, I don't care how many votes you could get on the floor, it's not passing if you got the wrong bill sponsor. So this is absolutely critical that you are vetting any potential bill sponsors, and you're the one who's going to decide who you want for a bill sponsor. It's funny, I was just on a conference call this week in Indiana. We've got a bill being introduced, and we had the Speaker of the House called me up, and he said, we have 3 potential bill sponsors, and I told them I only want one. So will you do me a favor and be on a Zoom call with us today? And I want you to decide who do you want for the bill sponsor. So we had the Speaker of the House and the 3 representatives. We had the chair of the Family Services Committee, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and we were all on a call. And that's what you want. You want us deciding and interviewing to find out which one of those 3 do we want to be the bill sponsor. So what you're looking for is, number one, they've got to be in the majority party. It's a shame. And it wasn't like that 20 years ago, but things have become so partisan nowadays that in the overwhelming majority of states, if you're in Illinois, Jed Davis, who's one of our bill sponsors, is never going to get anything done in Illinois without LaShawn Ford helping him. So you've got to have a majority party bill sponsor. Are they liked by their colleagues? And more importantly, are they liked by leadership? I was out in Denver, Colorado this year, and I was having lunch with the Speaker of the House. I won't say what state, but I was having lunch with the Speaker of the House of one state. And as we were chatting, I mentioned that, I'll be coming to your state. I've got a bill that's being introduced. And he said, oh, who do you have as a sponsor? And I mentioned the person's name. And he said, just so you know, I won't ever let any bill by that person be seen. That will never see the light of day. You need to find a different sponsor. And it shouldn't be like that, but it is. If somebody did something to offend somebody in leadership, there is always payback. So the chair of the judiciary, the chair of the House, and the Speaker of the House, and the majority floor leader, those 4 people, you need to find out, is your bill sponsor liked by those 4 people? If not, your bill will not see the light of day. Are they an influencer in your legislature? Are they the type of person that when there's events, people come to those events? I was at a debate watch party a couple of weeks ago in Jeff City at Missouri. I'd met with had dinner at the governor's mansion, and then afterwards there was a debate party with the Trump and Harris debate. And somebody invited me to a debate watch party, and there was a particular senator there that was throwing this, and there were probably 30 legislators that showed up. That's the type of person you want as a sponsor. A senator who says, I am having a debate watch party, and 30 other legislators come to his party instead of hosting their own. That's an influencer. You need to find out who that person is in your House and in your Senate. Make sure that they have some personal experience. Don't just take somebody who the first time they ever heard about parental alienation or problems in the family court system was your meeting. That's not going to be a good one. I promise you, in every state across the country, there are people. In the state of Missouri, we have what I call the Shared Parenting Caucus. 13 members of the Missouri legislature that have personally been through a custody battle. And so we get together in person a couple times a year and on Zoom several times a year talking. These are the bill sponsors that we're going to have as bill sponsors. Why? They're passionate. They lived it. They're going to fight for it. Are they articulate or are they kind of passive? Are they accessible? You want to make sure that are your calls getting answered by that person, because down the road, you may have to have some amendments added or taken away from your bill. you want to make sure that you can get a hold of that legislator anytime, any place, anywhere. So make sure that you pick somebody that's accessible. Make sure that they've got a relationship with a handler in the other chamber. Hopefully everybody knows, but you'll need to pass a bill in both the House and the Senate, unless you're in Nebraska, because they only have one chamber in Nebraska. But so if you've got a House bill sponsor, at some point that's going over to the Senate. You need to find out who is their handler in the Senate. And is their handler liked by their colleagues? Is their handler liked by leadership? And then make sure, like I said, are they 100% on your side? I think many of you are aware that you will have decoys that will approach you. We've had this in several states where somebody will call you up and say, hey, I heard that you're looking forward to passing a 50-50 bill. And boy, I'd sure like to help you. I've written a draft that I think would be able to be passed. And this is a legislator calling you up. Well, it turns out that person is owned by the Bar Association, and they're filing a bill that in the middle of that bill is encoded certain words that basically ruin the effectiveness of the whole bill. So the summary of the bill looks really good until you realize that there's some words that negate the whole bill right in the middle of that. And the bill is basically to keep you from working on the bill you were wanting to introduce, because they get you all, they're basically a narcissist. They come in love bombing you and everything, and then you find out that their bill was a decoy the whole time to keep you away from the bill. So make sure you do some research on somebody before you allow them to be a bill sponsor. And then know the score. Most of you know, I don't ever walk into a committee meeting without knowing how is that vote count going to go. Now, there's sometimes we know we're going to lose, but I would still like to get the word out so we have the hearing anyway. Even though we know we're going to lose, at least we're helping to raise awareness. But I'm always amazed at people that walk into a committee meeting thinking that they're going to give some dynamite presentation that's going to sway everybody. Guys, if you've ever watched committee hearings at the federal level, you'll know almost, and there's an exception every once in a while, but it's very rare. In almost every case, those committee members know when they walk into that hearing how they're going to vote ahead of time. When they have those Senate confirmation hearings, guys, that's for show. There's not a Senate member on those committees that doesn't know how they're going to vote. They know how they're going to vote, but they have to play it up to the public of, well, I'm going to listen to both sides during this hearing, and I'd like to find out to make sure that I really analyze. They're just saying that so that their constituents think that they're really listening. They're not, okay? I've been in these committee meetings. I've been at legislators' houses, but the day before committee meetings where they've told me stories of things that they've done in committee hearings to sway the vote or to sway the public, because everybody already knew how they were going to vote. So know what the whip count is ahead of time, both in the committee and on the floor. In almost every chamber across the country, though, we've got the floor vote. The big problem we always have is committee. And that's why you want to know the whip count. Is if there's a judicial committee, in most states, the judicial committee is the hardest, because in almost every state, the Bar Association owns that committee. And they almost always own that chair of that committee. So a lot of times the Bar Association will go to the Speaker of the House and say, these are the bills we want going to judiciary, knowing that the chair is going to either just stall it out and won't even have a hearing on it, or they'll have a hearing but not have a vote. And they just keep it going, almost like in family court when they say, oh, we're coming back in 2 months again. That's exactly what happens in committee hearings. So we want to find out what's the whip count in the Judiciary Committee and the Family Services Committee. What I recommend is that you meet with the Speaker of the House. Realize, guys, the Speaker of the House in every state is the one who makes the determination. Do they want this bill going to Judiciary or a Family Services Committee? So you need to build that relationship with the Speaker ahead of time, and you tell them, I want this bill going to the Family Services Committee. You also want to build a relationship with the chair of the committee, saying, hey, can you do me a favor and help me? Can you go to the Speaker and say, hey, I heard this bill is coming up. When it comes up, can you assign it to my committee? And ask them to request it. But know the whip count of both the committee and the floor of both chambers. And that's just a picture. We had a year ago, we had a little celebration. So we know we did pass, we got a 2-for-1 in Missouri with SB 55. We got not only equal shared parenting, but we also got due process before they can take your license away for arrearages. And so now judges have to document with facts, findings, and conclusions how they arrived at their conclusion based on, did this person lose their job through no fault of their own? Did COVID cause, their company go out of business? Did the company have mass layoffs? Does this person need their license to be able to earn a living? Do they need a driver's license to take care of their child or an aging parent or to get to work? So we have a whole series of determining factors now. So they can't just automatically take somebody's license away. But that was a bill signing ceremony down on the right-hand side with Governor Parson there. And then, like I said, we had a little celebration. Some of you may have been in St. Louis. It was literally standing room only. It was a pretty neat event. We had over 20 legislators from across the country. But we're looking forward to doing that in a lot more states across the country. Not trying to get a sales pitch, but in case some of you may not have a big interest, but if you are, I did go ahead and write a book called The Insider's Guide to Passing Legislation based on 40 years of doing this. So in there is 324 pages of things that I learned, and not that I'm so smart that I came up with this. It was 20 years of taking notes from Phyllis Schlafly, from sitting with people like a Morton Blackwell that founded the Leadership Institute, that trained 241,000 graduates, including 140 current members of U.S. Congress and their staff, were trained by Morton Blackwell. Well, when I ran for U.S. Congress, I got to know Morton very, very well, and I've actually done some of his trainings at Leadership Institute. So I wrote a book that goes step by step. So if you know nothing about politics at all, this will tell you the basics at the beginning of what is a Speaker of the House, what is a whip leader, what is a majority floor leader, what's a caucus leader, how do the committees work. Then it gets into how to write a bill. Then it gets into how to find the bill sponsor, how to get past the gatekeeper, how to frame the narrative, how to talk to the media. But I go through about 45 different topics in 324 pages. So I'm not trying to sell the book. I'm really not. But if you do have an interest, it is available. Just contact me by email. And then I am doing a very intense boot camp in the month of November. I'm going to do an hour and a half for 4 Mondays on the month of November by Zoom, and then 2 conference calls on a Thursday in the off weeks of total questions and answers. So if anybody's really wanting to dive in, make sure because that class will fill up. So let me know ahead of time if you're interested. So does anybody have any questions, or Larry or Joni, anything extra that you wanted me to cover? Or I know you guys have a lot to do and you're already getting a little behind schedule. So
No, we're actually doing okay, Mark. One, is it possible if somebody mentions the PA consortium that you'll give them a discount on the book?
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you say it again?
You're good, go.
Mark,
Oh yeah.
hi, sorry. The book, if somebody mentions the PA consortium and having been here or on virtual, can you give a discount on it? Because it is a bit expensive, but it's a great book, guys. It is a phenomenal book. John Hamill got my copy.
Yeah, I can, just so you know, guys, I only printed 75 of them because it's such a niche. It's not like it's going to be a bestseller. And if anybody knows anything about printing, by the time you do a color copy and pay for formatting and editing and self-print, 75 copies of a 324-page book, it's expensive to print. So I could give a $15. I charge 75, and I give it now. It's like a textbook. I mean, if you go to college, you're going to spend 150, 200 books on a textbook. This isn't a novel you're going to read one time. This is a manual that you're going to read, and you're going to highlight, you're going to underline it. Even in my copy, you can probably see I've got notes in there. I've highlighted, I've underlined. So this is a manual that you're going to be using for years and years and years. So it is normally 75, but yeah, shoot me an email that you were here, and I'll knock. I can't go any lower than 60 because, like I said, then I end up losing money on this first running of them. But yeah, shoot me an email and just mention that you were here, and we'll do it for 60 then. But I know it's expensive, but I can promise you this: the value is in there, because I can promise you it will save you thousands of dollars worth of your labor going to Capitol doing it wrong.
Mark, I got a follow-up question. Since most of us don't like killing trees, do you have a digital book?
Thanks for asking. I am going to be doing that. George Peacecore from NPO has been after me. He got a copy. He's like, Mark, this is the best book I've ever seen. He's like, this is what we've needed all along. But yeah, he said the average person nowadays is doing ebook. So I think
Why don't-
George and NPO are going to work with me to try and get it out on ebook sometime in the next month or so. Thanks for asking about that.
Why don't we short circuit that? Why don't I give you $100? You send me a PDF of the author's proof, and then Bob's your uncle, right?
Yeah, well, shoot me an email and of your contact information with that.
Mark, could you talk, it's John Hamill here.
Hey, how you doing, John?
I'm well, thank you. Can you talk about chapter 39 in your book, which is analyzing the probability of a state? So, again, you've all invested time to come to this conference. And if you're all going to be involved in drafting legislation for your own states and helping with other states, you have to buy this book. It comes in, paperback or hardback. Mark's graciously given you $60. The book sells for $100. So if you're not a lawyer and if you haven't served in the legislature, you really have to be educated on what you're doing. So chapter 39, Mark, is I think key because we're going to be working on legislation today. So kind of give us an idea as to, the right direction to go in. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for asking that. And yeah, like I said, I apologize. I can apologize for the price one time, but I'll never have to apologize for the quality. The other thing is most of down the road, my goal is to use the manual and the training courses to get some funding. This summer I was in 13 states, 9 state capitals, and had 62 meetings with legislators. And as most of you know, that's pretty expensive by the time you figure airfare, hotel, and that's time off from me Ubering. I can't earn a living while I'm doing that kind of stuff. So to try and help offset that, I've come up with the training courses to try and utilize that money by creating some value added. But yeah, John, great question as far as analyzing a state, because there's some states that we're just never going to get anything. Some states we may not get anything at all for, say, a rebuttable presumption of 50-50, but we might be able to get some child support reform changes. That's one thing that in blue states, we're making a lot more progress on child support reform. So in most blue states, I don't know that we're going to get a 50-50 bill passed in the near future, but we've had some great progress made on child support reform and equity and equality in child support. So when you're analyzing a state, several things you're looking at. Number one, you need to look at what have people done in the past and who is out there. That's the first thing I always look at, because whenever I go to a state, I don't want to just immediately start calling legislators. If NPO has been actively working a state for, say, 5 years, I'm ruining some of their effectiveness if I come into that state automatically without talking to Don Hubin to find out, hey, Don, what are you doing in the state? We need to make sure that we're working together, because if I'm a legislator, I'm turned off if I find out there's 3 groups fighting amongst themselves for who's going to get the trophy at the end of the thing. That is a big turnoff for me. So number one, you need to find out who's out there. What have they done? Are they professional? Or have they left us with a bad taste? We've had a lot of people in Michigan and Texas years ago that created a horrible reputation. They created the traditional angry dad image. Now, I don't blame them. It's a very emotional issue. They didn't have the background, so they didn't know that they were doing it wrong. They thought they were doing something. So I'm truly not putting them down, but there's a lot of legislators in those states that today still won't talk to people because of an image. So number one, what's the image in that state that's been conveyed in the past? Another thing you're looking at is, do you have somebody that could be a good sponsor? Yeah, you have a great bill sponsor in a certain state, and it doesn't matter how many things are stacked against you in that state. That person's passionate. Jamie Flick is a prime example. Pennsylvania, as Larry and John can probably tell you, is not the most favorable state for getting a 50-50 rebuttable presumption. But bless his heart, Jamie is bound to determine. Jamie and I talk about every other day right now. Matter of fact, Larry, I'm probably going to be coming to Pennsylvania in a couple of weeks here. But, Jamie is determined to do whatever it takes to get that bill passed. So I'm looking for, do I have a potential hardcore bill sponsor in that state? How many grassroots advocates do we have? Is it a state where we've got a lot of advocates? Texas, even though they had some people in the past that were bad, they've got some great people. Texas has more active advocates and professional ones. We've got people like a Robert Garza and a Josh Jaros and a David Bellows, and they've done a phenomenal job of changing the narrative in Texas to, hey, these are some professional people that look like they know what they're doing. So are there people in that state that can convey a more positive narrative from a grassroots aspect? The Speaker of the House, are they favorable to us? Does it look like they'll be able to get something done? The opposition, how active and how organized is the Bar Association? In Missouri, we were able to neutralize the Bar Association. So if you've ever seen a Missouri hearing, anybody who speaks for the Bar Association has to make the disclaimer now at the start of at their testimony, hey, officially the Bar Association of Missouri takes a no position standpoint, so I can't speak for the Bar Association. So we want to try and neutralize as many states, but there's some states, the bar basically dictates everything that happens. So how organized is the bar in that state? What about the DV groups? Michigan has some of the most orchestrated DV groups and radical DV groups. I have no problem with domestic violence, genuine domestic violence groups that are truly out to make sure that the true victims don't get hurt. But as a lot of us know, there's some phony domestic violence groups that try to make it look like every person out there is an abuser, and just so they can get Title IV grant money. So I want to find out the opposition. How strong are they in that particular state? What's the speed of bills in a state? There's some states that it takes forever. Pennsylvania, when you've got a full year term state where they're in session all year long, it's a little harder to get one. And Pennsylvania too, just because of the volume of bills. Texas is another one. When you've got 3,000 to 5,000 potential bill ideas, it's hard to move. If you go to a smaller state, say a Wyoming, that only has 6 weeks to their session, South Dakota that only has 40 days to their session. Why? They don't have many bills. I'm not putting South Dakota or Wyoming down, but they don't have an industrial city like New York City and all the stuff going on. It's Wyoming, South Dakota. There's just not many bill ideas. In South Dakota and Wyoming, you could introduce a bill in the House on Monday, have it hit committee Tuesday morning, on Wednesday morning, hit the House floor, be sent over, have a Senate hearing on the Senate by Thursday, and Monday the next week have a Senate vote on the floor. It's unreal. You literally in 7 days could move a bill from being introduced in one chamber to passed in both chambers just that quick. So you're looking at the speed that some of the states pass a bill. Once again, the committee chairs, do they traditionally sit on bills? There's some states that will move a bill very fast. Their committees are known for, if it gets assigned to their committee, they're going to have a hearing, they're going to have a vote on the committee, and it gets sent to the speaker. There's a lot of other states like Ohio that our bill, HB 14, sat in their committee for 18 months during a 2-year session. So we want to find out what's the probability that it's going to stay. What is the success in neighboring states? So far we've passed solid 50-50 bills in West Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, and Florida. Well, if you're in Tennessee or in Indiana, if you're a red state near a red state that just got done passing them, especially 2 or 3 states, you've got a better chance. Traditionally, red states are better for 50-50 bills. So if you've got a super majority red state, you've got a very high probability that you're going to make a lot of progress in that state on a 50-50 bill. If you've got a super high majority on a blue state, you're not going to pass a 50-50 bill. You need to look for child support reform. What's the consensus of both chambers? And then how many bar association members are there in that state that are legislators? Because if you've got a ton of bar association members in a legislature, I don't care if it's a red state or blue state, you're just not going to move the needle too much. So I go through a few more details, and I'm going to cover that in a lot more detail in that boot camp that I'm doing. And in that one, I'll actually give personal examples because, like I said, right now I've got 31 states that I have bills ready to go in. After speaking at that National Association for Christian Lawmakers and ALEC, 31 states that we have legislators that have committed, hey, Mark, I will sponsor your bill in my state. So at the boot camp, I'm going to go through what those states are and why I like this state, why I don't like this state. But excellent question, John. Thanks so much. And by the way, thanks for all the work that you do, John. Appreciate you.
Hey, Mark, Brian Hart here. Thank you for all your time and are doing. I'm going to throw 3 topics at you so that you can answer them succinctly and pick whatever you want to talk about. Massachusetts, we're going through 3 testimony sessions, like 1 a month for 3 months. Child support, I don't know if all states do it. Typically, every 3 years they review it. And a lot of the feminist groups, you know, have succeeded in just up the percentages for that. So I'm wondering if you have a couple quick comments on that. The second topic would be, you mentioned looking at legislator backgrounds to find the good ones that'll support your bill. How do you do that quickly, right? You know, you got 200 legislators. Do you look at LinkedIn or you go look at their Facebook? It's a tedious process. I don't know if you have any shortcuts. And the last question, I can repeat these if you forget them. I know it's a lot to put on your mind. Hayden's Law, it seems like they're waving a lot of money, federal money, in front of their eyes, but it's not as much as they say. And how stringent are they on holding the state's feet to the fire that they have to write the laws exactly as that Caden's nonsense was in that Federal Violence Against Women Act thing they slipped in at the last minute? So whichever of those you think is the most important or to start with. Thank you.
Excellent questions, Brian. And Joni, let me know how I'm here. Like I said, I don't mind talking as much as you guys want me to, but I also don't want to overstay my welcome. So if you need me to, you won't offend me if you need to give me the boot, Joni.
Joni's saying excellent. We got time.
Okay. But yeah, good questions. First off, you have a very good point. We've been on defense for years because the opposition have figured out how to get Title IV-D, Title IV-E, and TANF funds that they can use basically to promote their causes. They're using government money to promote their causes. I don't want to describe it on something that's might be being recorded, but off the record, I'll just tell you, there's some things that we're doing right now that we're going to play their game. We now are going to start using some federal funds, and we're talking some large dollars to promote our causes, and we're going to beat them at their own game. And we've got some laws that are being written. I've already met with the budget chairs of several states. The funding's already out there. Some of this funding is going to some of our opposition, and I've met with the budget chairs of several states. Some of that money in 2025 is going to start being redirected to us. So we're going to get our message out. We're going to get the message out that kids need both parents in their lives. So that's one thing. Like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail. The 2 other questions you had was, the hearings. That are you talking about the 4-year review that they're required to do for Title IV-D?
Well,
child support.
That might be in the background, but you know, in the foreground, it's a child support testimony opportunities.
Okay. Yeah, because every 4 years, all states are required by the Title IV-D program to hold a public hearing on child support. What we need to do is get people that can articulate the message. In the past, we've had people that show up giving their personal story of, my child support's too high and I shouldn't have to, and it comes into, once again, talking about their story. We need people that can articulate the message, and this is really resonating with Democrats. I'm telling you, man, we are getting Democrats on board like you can't imagine when we talk about the fact that how does it serve the child when one parent has to go in poverty and has to eat food out of a dumpster because they're supporting the other house. And it's important that we articulate the message. One analogy I give is, hey, in my little condo here, I pay a mortgage on 2 bedrooms. I can't go to my mortgage company and say, you know what, my son's only with me 4 overnights a month. Can I only pay the mortgage on that portion of my, condo for the equivalent of 4 days a month? No, if you've got a room in your house, you're paying rent or a mortgage on the whole month on that. So why is it okay for the paying parent to be expected to pay part of the expenses of the other house while not being able to pay their own expenses in their own house? And explain and articulate that the marginal cost of that child, if I have air conditioning on in my house, the marginal air conditioning that the child uses in that other house is not $200 a month worth of air conditioning. They were going to air condition the whole house anyway. They were going to pay a heating bill anyway. So the marginal cost of that extra child is, to be honest, it's actually negligent, believe it or not. There's some of you may know the professor in California. I forget his name. Joni probably knows him, but there's a professor in California that does a great study on child support and talking about the fact that there is no actual added cost for most people on their first child. There's a redirection of money because a married couple with no children will go out to eat on a regular basis. They're going to spend money on entertainment. They're going to have a den in their house, or, you know, an extra room in their house to use as an extra office or a guest bedroom. When they have a child, instead of going out to eat, that money is converted to childcare expenses now. The extra office that they had in their house, or the weight room that they had in their house, is converted to the child's bedroom now. So there was no extra bedroom. Most people don't buy a new house when they have their first child. They keep the same house. They just reallocate the way things are. So if that's true, why is there this huge jump in child support when somebody has a first child? So we need people that can articulate the message in that manner, and we need a bunch of them doing it on a regular basis. So that's a good point to make. And then what was the third one that you had?
It was, how do you identify out of the 200 or more legislators, how do you quickly identify the ones that might be most interested in supporting?
Excellent question. For a lot of those, to be honest, you're going to need to contact me privately. I have to sign agreements with ALEC and non-disclosures with ALEC and NACL and Eagle Council, but I'm a part of some large organizations of legislators across the country. So I've got a database of about 600 legislators. There's not too many states that I don't have legislators that I've talked to in the last 3 months even about shared parenting issues. So I have an idea who are the favorable ones, who is not favorable. I see Jennifer on here from Louisiana. We're on a conference call every week, and she could tell you, they're asking me every week. They're, okay, Mark, what about this guy? What about this guy? And most of them I've met with. So if they're a member of National Association of Christian Lawmakers, they're going to be supportive because it was unanimous, the vote count when I gave my talk, that they all agreed to support it. So the thing is, though, we're not allowed to give membership rolls out of who's on NACL, and you'll never see their membership published, but I know who they are. So I can't give the whole membership, but if you're in a certain state and I've met with you, I've vetted you, I believe in you, now I'm not just going to randomly tell every person who I know. Because sometimes if I don't know that person's reputation, they may ruin my reputation by going to a state capitol saying I'm a friend of Mark Ludwig's, and they're wearing a, I hate all judges t-shirt. That doesn't help my image. So if I know somebody and I trust them, if they're a Larry DeMarco or somebody like that, Larry's the type of guy, Larry and I have a good relationship. If Larry needs a lead, I'll let him know, hey, Larry, talk to this person in your state. But I've got a database of about 600 legislators across the country. One good tip that I will tell you is, and once again, I don't care what your stance is on these issues, it's just a fact. If someone is a Second Amendment supporter, almost unanimously across the country, they support our issue. And the way to talk to them is, when you go to them, say, hey, let me tell you what, there's a lot of places across the country where people are using red flag laws to basically strip a parent of their child's rights, where somebody is a gun owner and somebody will make a random call to the police department saying this person's a threat to society, and they'll make up a bogus allegation, have that person's home raided to take their gun away for them. Before that was done, though, they pay a private detective to sit outside the parking lot to get a picture of the police showing up at the house, the police in the house, and they're going to use that in a custody battle to get the upper hand, saying, well, I saw the police at that person's house taking their gun away. Not saying the reason was because that person made a red flag, phone call, a hotline call anonymously, and set the whole thing up. Second Amendment supporters get it. And so if you use that, they don't care about our issue, but what they do care about is Second Amendment. So find a way to tailor our issue to them. So, but great question, Brian. Appreciate that.
Mark, good morning. It's David Kalin from FanPack. How are you?
FanPack. How you doing, guy?
Like to see that smile.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys. You guys do a dynamite job in New Jersey.
Always appreciate seeing you, and the work you do is fantastic. I picked up on something you said a little earlier, which I think is important for those of us gathering here today. You recognize that there's a difference between legislation that's likely to move forward in red states versus blue states. So can you talk a little bit about where you see those trends in those states, so maybe we could be more efficient here the rest of the day as we move forward with our legislative thoughts and little breakout groups? So I appreciate your input.
Yeah, appreciate the question. And once again, I am sincerely proud of you guys with FanPack. You guys have done a phenomenal job in New Jersey. It's a very, very tough state, but you guys are making a lot of progress. But yeah, in blue states, you're just not going to make progress on 50-50. It's just not happening. You still want to try though, because you always want to make sure that the seed's in the hopper just in case. So I'm not telling you when I say it's not going to, don't give up on it, because then you're going to have to start from scratch again when we can make progress. So I always tell people, keep things moving. That's why even in Illinois, we'll be filing some bills in Illinois next year. They're not going to pass, but I want to make sure that at least the awareness is out there again. Oh yeah, 50-50. So that when we do think we're going to make progress. In a blue state though, I'll just tell you, across the country, it is amazing the number of Democrats that are giving me phone calls saying, hey, I heard about your SB 35 in Missouri. Can you help me craft a bill like that? The due process aspect. And I met with Elizabeth Warren in Washington, D.C. years, it was before COVID. Now, Elizabeth and I disagree on about every other issue there is. And so I didn't expect that we were going to get in. By the way, it's important too that you make sure you never make it personal. Anybody who's followed me personal, I'm very strong on my beliefs, on my conservative beliefs, but I will never attack a Democrat personally. You will never see me make Biden jokes or Kamala Harris jokes or, anything like that. Why? Guys, if you're going to be in a state capitol, you will never get anything passed if you do that. Yes, legislators can fight amongst each other. Yes, people outside the arena can fight amongst each other. But if you're going to be a lobbyist, formally or informally, you cannot do that. So I never will speak bad about any legislator. I always stick to the issue, and I'll always frame it in a professional manner. I may be really riled up inside, but when I'm in front of anybody in the public, we're going to talk about the issue. We're going to talk it professionally, and I'm going to be very respectful about how I disagree with them. But Elizabeth Warren made the comment. She said, oh yeah, she said, I have a lot of constituents in my state that are sitting in jail right now because they fell behind on child support. Then they got even farther behind because their rearages are racking up while they're sitting in jail. And how are they ever supposed to get caught up? So Democrats love talking about fairness and equality. So when I'm talking about to a Democrat, Carla May, who was the co-sponsor of the Missouri bill that wrote the verbiage to the due process, she talks about this, and this is her saying this. So please don't get offended. This is her saying it, but she said, she's in the Ferguson district in Missouri that a lot of you remember the bogus Ferguson riots that we all toured, that nobody ever found out it really did not happen the way they said. But Carla even says, she said, hey, in my state, or in my city, I've got a lot of Black fathers that they're not walking away from their kids, they're being pushed away. Because if a Black father, and this is her saying this, so I hope you're not offended, but she said if a Black father shows up in a courtroom, they know the judge is going to look at them and say, you're probably a gang member or something like that, and you're avoiding getting a job, and we're going to impute child support that the person can't pay. And because you haven't paid anything, you haven't been involved, we're not even going to give you every other weekend. You're going to be lucky if you get 2 supervised visits a month. She said, if I'm a Black dad in Ferguson, why am I going to go to court? I'd rather just run and hide. And she said, that's happening all across the Ferguson area. So that is resonating when you're talking to some of the blue state people. But definitely point them to SB 35. I think they will like that. And I can also connect them with people like a LaShawn Ford, like a Carla May, some of the Democrats across the country that are starting to champion our cause because they want to talk to other Democrats.
Mark, it's Joni. I've uploaded what I could find for which states are blue and which are red from Wikipedia to the Google Drive. If you go into the chat, folks, you'll see the link to the Google Drive. We're gonna just keep adding information. That's what we're gonna work from, okay? But that blue state thing will be in there, so that might help.
Excellent, thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you.
Mark, I think Jennifer had a question for you. I need to get her to unmute. There we go.
Mark, I just wondered if you would, when you mentioned that you've had some success in different states with shared parenting bills in the recent history, given the legislative work we're going to be doing, do you happen to know those bill numbers, or could you send them to us? So of course we have the Missouri SB 35, but.
Oh, that's right. Yes. As far as the gold standard bill, the best 50-50 rebuttable presumption bill in the country is the Arkansas bill. Hands down, if you're going to point to legislator, point it to that. We've got some things in Missouri that still need to be tweaked on that. So I'm proud of the Missouri bill, but just like anything, it's a work in progress. The gold standard, hands down, is Arkansas. The second best is the Kentucky bill, with the exception there was a floor amendment added on. That Kentucky's not a bad bill. I think some people are trying to instigate a fight between me and NPO or something with Kentucky. I'll just tell you what, Kentucky paved the way for all of us. It wouldn't have happened with NPO, without NPO, and without their bill in Kentucky. So I want to make sure I clarify, they did a phenomenal job there. But there was a floor amendment added on that basically gave the impression that if a order of protection is in the process of being filed, the rebuttable presumption shall not apply. And I think the bill as a whole was so strong. It was a super strong bill that I think the message was sent to judges and attorneys across the state. Unfortunately, as we all know, there's a small number of unethical ones. They're going to take that little clause and try and create havoc in the family courts. I think Kentucky as a whole is a really good bill, so please don't think I'm putting it down. But if you can find the original Kentucky bill that Matt Hale helped write, the original form without that floor amendment is a very good example. And then, like I said, the Arkansas bill, those two are the gold standards in the country.
And the Arkansas bills, number, do you remember that?
It could be 614, but I can't remember. But if you Google Arkansas equal shared parenting, because in Arkansas, they change the number once it passes.
Yeah.
So it'll have one number while it's in the legislature, and once it goes to the governor, it now
becomes an act.
I think the final number was 614.
Okay. And would you recommend what happened in Kentucky? It's actually potentially, because it was such great progress, is that a good example of kind of incremental change? And I'm muting.
Yes, exactly. That's the challenge. So many times we want to, and there's two philosophies. One is, man, we want the most perfect bill, and we're standing we're going to die on this hill, and we want every single item. And I'm not putting down people with that philosophy. The challenge is that's a very hard bill to pass. Sometimes it's easier just to, hey, let's pass at least a little bit and get some progress, get some momentum shifted our side. And then it's a little easier to pass another bill 2 years later, and then another bill 2 years later. And once again, I'm known as a Republican, but I'll tell you what, the Democrats have genius strategies in many states on many of their issues, because they don't go for the home run every time. They do a small bill and then another bill and then another bill. And then, by golly, after 4 or 5 years, you realize they just got their whole bill passed. So I tend to like their strategy, to be honest, in a lot of occasions. So Larry, did you have something for me?
Yes. My name is John. I was listening to you on the way in, and I was listening to the conference on the way out yesterday. I had to go home because of an illness. First of all, I have successfully sued judges in federal court. I survived the motion to dismiss on Title II Discrimination Act against the judge, and I am now pursuing the constitutionality of supervised visitation. A person cannot pay a fee to visit their children. It's a violation of the Constitution under Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. The issue I want to bring here into the attention, and the question I have, is Connecticut has a new constitutional resolution that you cannot discriminate based upon sex. It's actually Article 21 of the Title 21 of the Connecticut Constitution. It was the Fifth Amendment to the Connecticut Constitution, which has been amended several times. So if our courts are discriminating based upon sex on a usual basis by awarding custody to the mother and limiting visitation, isn't that a constitutional violation? And do we use that constitutional issue in the Connecticut courts in order to spur the legislature the 50-50 resolution? Because have they not adopted 50-50 by adopting that constitutional resolution?
Yeah, that's probably more a legal issue versus a legislative. I always because I get people all the time asking me for advice on their case, and I always tell them, my background is the legislative arena, and I give the analogy, it's almost like in the medical field, you think, well, this guy's a heart surgeon and this guy's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Shouldn't they both be able to do the same thing? Well, they each have different specialties. My specialty is knowing how to move things through the legislative arena. That may be something for, say, a class action lawsuit. Now, one thing that we could do on the legislative side that I'd like to see is a vital statistics bill that forces judges to document who was the mother, who was the father, how much was spent on each case, and how much time did they give to each person. Then we would be able to have the documentation for somebody like you to come in with a lawsuit saying, hey, in this state here, we've got it shows right now across the state, 83% of the cases, the mother got the award. Unfortunately, in most states, there's not really documentation that we have for something like that.
Well, if something that I can ask you to do is write a one-page sheet where I can move in discovery in the federal case as to that documentation, forcing the state to produce it as discovery in the federal lawsuit.
Well, but right now there's no states that require judges to file that information. So first we would have to get the legislation passed requiring them with a vital statistic bill that they have to show, was it the mother, was it the father? Right now, to my knowledge, there's not a state in the country that requires judges to document whether the mother or the father was given the time.
No, you missed my point. In my federal lawsuit, I can require the state judiciary who I am suing as a whole. I can require the state judiciary, or I can ask that the state judiciary produce that in discovery. So if you give me,
you could try it. I don't know if it would work or not. I think what most of them would say is, "Hey, we don't have a method of doing that."
No, just give me a one-page sheet of what questions I need to ask.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Shoot me an email and I can get with you afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Mark, I actually emailed you and you already answered it. You said we have a bill that's really close. Your best one, Arkansas, I think you said. So what we were wondering is that our best practices template to use? Because we'll certainly help in other ways, but if you've already done that heavy lifting in Arkansas for us, and that is the model bill that we should really be, the best case scenario that we should be approaching as a template, that does a lot of work that we were going to do already. You have it.
As a whole, night at the boot camp I'm doing, because there's a whole lot to writing legislation, because as you're aware, every single state has their codes. And so what they do is somebody changes this part of the code, and then 2 years later, this part gets changed in this code. So it's hard to say that something's going to be a model template for the whole country, because the family law code section of every single state is so varied that you really need to look at each individual state. Now, one thing I'm doing in the training course I'm doing in November, I'm going to go through each section, because when you look at, say, take a 50-50 bill, and Ron Henry's trying to pick my brain to figure out what I've been doing on all these states of exactly that. Number one, you're going to need to have a good summary, a very clear and concise summary written for your bill, articulating exactly what you're hoping to get accomplished. Then you're going to need to have what the definition is. So if you're saying, equal shared parenting, what does equal mean? It's very, important. An example is, and this is why I said every state varies. The Missouri bill clearly states Missouri shall have a rebuttable presumption that it is in the best interest of a child to have equal or as close to equal as possible time with both parents. So we've defined what best interest of the child is subtly. That's what a lot of people think, oh, you're defining equal shared parenting. No, if you realize we snuck the words in, it is in the best interest of the child. So from now on in the state of Missouri, anytime they try using best interest of the child, we can show, oh, it's in our code. It states very clearly in Missouri, the best interest of the child means equal shared parenting or as close as possible. Unfortunately, remember I told you different statutes are written in a different section of the code that we didn't catch. Somewhere in there, it said equal shared parenting means equal, but not necessarily equal. Well, to the average person reading that means nothing. Unfortunately, there's a judge in Missouri that filed a case saying, well, no, it says not necessarily equal. So they ruled basically an every other weekend, saying that, well, hey, this conflicts with the thing. So it's very important. That's why this year I'm putting together a team of attorneys, of about 10 to 12 attorneys across the country. and we're going to vet every single bill to make sure. Now in Missouri, unless you get some rogue wackadoo, they're not going to be able to use that. I mean, in Missouri, it says best interest of the child. So that one's going to go, it's going to be appealed. But
Mark,
so we're going to have, oh, go ahead.
for practical reasons, we have a working group here. They're very interested in shared parenting, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel of the Arkansas bill, is what I'm trying to tell you, because
I got
you answered, you gave us valuable information. You said we have a model, you know, the number one best practice is Arkansas. Did you want to modify Arkansas in any way in the ideal world? Is there
Yeah, a
any
couple.
you want us to add to it? We'll do that, but otherwise we have it.
Explain this a little
Yeah,
better.
the template that you're doing, like I said, you need to have a clear definition section. You need to have what's known as the determining factors to overcome the rebuttal. So it may be, do the parents live geographically apart? So you're going to have some determining factors to overcome the rebutment or the presumption. And then you need to have the standard of evidence. Is it going to be a preponderance? Is it going to be clear and convincing?
So Mark, let me see if I can explain this a little bit better for you. What these templates are going to be all the possible pieces. So we may need several definitions that a state can choose one of those definitions that might fit better for their state. We are literally putting a template that can be used around the world. The state can take the parts they need and disregard the ones they don't. So we're looking for something with totality of every possible thing that that a state or a country could use. So would you say the Arkansas bill in this case would be our standard we should stand by, and then take the bits and pieces from the other bills to put them in as alternative wording that could be used?
Yes and no. Like I said, it's definitely the gold standard, because it has the components that we need. It's got the clear definition. It's got the right determining factors that we want without the exclusions that we don't want. It's got the standard of evidence with clear and convincing. But the way it's worded, it takes we had to change several pieces throughout that wouldn't fit. So in the class that I'm doing in November, Jennifer will tell you, I've been working on for about 2 years, actually, the component parts of an ideal rebuttable presumption bill that I've developed, and I've tailored it to many of the states, especially the 31 states I'll be working in. So in November, I'm going to be going through state by state what this state needs to do, because what Georgia needs to do is going to be totally different than what Arkansas did. So there, like I say, if you need a template, Arkansas is good, but then you need to know how to interpret that, because there's both an art and a science to looking at the legislation. But yeah, if you need to look at one, like I said, Arkansas is definitely the gold standard at this point.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Quick question. I'm the parent of a special needs student who's aged out of the system. And I'd just like to mention and bring your awareness to the fact that this need for shared parenting exists also within the guardianship realm, and it falls nicely in line with the National Guardianship Association's best practices and policies. So just, if you would keep in mind that shared parenting also applies to children under guardianship and special needs students that have aged out of, custody situation.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for what you do. Yeah, my godson has Down syndrome, and I used to serve on the board of directors for the Special Needs Foundation here in St. Louis. So yeah, special needs kids have a close place. And I still work with the Special Needs Boy Scout troop here in St. Louis.
That's great.
I attend a lot of court of honors for the special needs kids. But yeah, you're right. That's an area that we need to be thinking about, because it doesn't end at 18 at that point.
Absolutely. And, once you get into the guardianship realm, all of a sudden the kids turn 18 and they want the kid to make a choice. And then you've got that same battle pulling the kid back and forth. And it's so destructive.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for your presentation. I'm Allison Tucker. Oh, sorry. I tend to be soft-spoken. I'm Allison Tucker, and I am thankful that you did a great presentation. I am a parent with a brainwashed child. who I am seeing now 50-50, thankfully, after 21 months of my son, not seeing him as regularly. I'm curious with the shared parenting bill. What are your suggestions in terms of legislation for how to define an unfit parent when there's counter parenting going on, and how to address that with legislation?
Oh, okay. A couple things about that is realize that, my passion is that 50-50 rebuttal presumption, but that's not going to solve all the problems. We've got a lot of work to do because as you're aware, even if you have 50-50, parental alienation is still going to be a problem. So I always tell people, and that's why that other gentleman that spoke about the lawsuits, we're all part of the same picture, and it takes all of us. Some people are going to need to file class action lawsuits and make sure that there's judicial accountability for some of the laws that we're passing, but we're still going to need to do other things to address parental alienation, because like I said, just because somebody has 50-50, you're not going to erase brainwashing. I mean, it happens. So we do need to try and write some bills that are going to better address parental alienation. It's just so hard because, as you're aware, most judges and guardian ad litems think they're doing the right thing, but the manipulator is so good that they manipulate the judges and the guardian ad litems, and they go exactly against what they should be doing on the side of the alienator instead of the person that they're being alienated from. So yeah, one thing we did, like I said, for people always ask me, aren't you going to be excited when 50-50 gets passed in every state? And my attitude is that's not going to solve the problem. We're still going to have to deal with parental alienation. Now, I do think 50-50 at least helps in a big way. But you've got about, and you guys may know the statistics better than me, but probably around 9 to 13% of hardcore alienators that are bound to determine to continue ripping the other parent out of the child's life. And so it's still going to happen. And they do it with different ways. They'll use the step parent and try and, bond the kid with the step parent and thing. They'll do, buying a puppy for the kid while the kid's on you with vacation. So there's that kind of stuff is always going to happen.
So do you not think that it's doable to focus on legislation around determining the definition of a fit parent and including counter parenting? So you're not removing the access to the other parent, you're just trying to prevent possible final decision making is being given to the targeted parent.
Yeah, good question. Definitely, we need to find a better way of putting that verbiage inside a bill to identify what parental alienation is. I think one method is, and we're working on a guardian ad litem reform bill in Missouri this year that I think will end up being the template for the entire country. We put a lot of work in the last 3 years. I don't know if you saw, but about 2.5 years ago during COVID, there were about 40 guardian ad litems that were on a Zoom call. And they got caught on record basically joking about and giving advice to other people on, hey, refer to this psychologist because they'll give you the ruling that the analysis that you want, and talking about how they can rack up a bill and it's all on video. And 21 judges recused themselves from the case because they had been a part of the whole little scheme going on. So right now, if there was ever a state that's going to pass a bill on it, it's Missouri. But one thing we're trying to address is to make sure that guardian ad litems are trained on parental alienation. One of the big problems that you guys are aware of, probably more than me, is this Cadence law, where they're basically saying, parental alienation doesn't exist, and you can't have guardian ad litems trained on parental alienation. So we're trying to fight from the other direction, saying, no, this is something that's growing. This needs to be addressed in cases. If you're worried about the kids, you can't have the emotional abuse that's going to linger with a child forever. So a great point. And I am looking for, like I said, on every one of these issues, my goal is to have a team of 8 to 12, what I call experts, so that if I'm with a legislator and they're wanting to put in something about custodial interference, I'm going to call people like a Robert Garza or Claudia down in Texas, or people like that. If they have somebody about paternity fraud, I'm calling Carnell Smith down in Alabama. If they talk about a fatherhood council, I'm calling Larry. But it sounds like you might be a good one on the advisory board for me on parental alienation issues. I'm looking for about 8 to 10 people, so that if I get a chance to insert something in a bill for parental alienation, I've got a team of people that can vet something really quick to say, what's your interpretation of this? So send me an email if you can, and make sure that you put that that you've got a background in parental alienation.
Mark, for your guardian ad litem stuff, know that Connecticut did a task force 2014, and we made guardian ad litem changes here. While those changes were great, the guardian ad litems found ways to circumvent around it. So look at our bill that they did.
Yeah, if you can, send me a copy of that.
I will.
And I'm
Okay. Oh, excellent.
very helpful with my case over the last 3 years. So yeah, so happy to connect with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for bringing that up.
Mark, Don got back to me about the model bill, and not to cause any conflict between you and him. He had West Virginia as an A+. Are you familiar with that statute? And are
Yes,
they
yeah.
one and 1A, or?
Yeah, matter of fact, you bring up a good point. NPO does have that shared parenting report card. So that would be a good one to look at. Like I said, I still like the Arkansas bill. Virginia is definitely a very good one. But when somebody was talking about what states to look at, like I said, NPO has that report card that's very good to look at.
All right, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to combine the best of both then, if that's okay with you. If you think that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like I said, and that's why I said we're not in competition. NPO has a much longer background doing this than I do. My specialty is moving it through the legislature, but NPO has done a lot more research than I have of where states are regarding shared parenting and where they are during child support. So I strongly encourage people, go to NPO's website. They've got some much better research than I have.
So look, we're great in terms of time. I have your cell. I'm going to really try not to bother you because you really were thorough. You really covered a lot for us. We are all, on behalf of all of us here today, we want to thank you for your generous time when you have your son. And we're applauding quietly because they don't want to talk over me. And now they're applauding loudly. So thank you, Mark. We appreciate you.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. And like I said, if you need to get a hold of me by email. If anybody is interested in the class, go ahead and shoot me. I'm not trying to sell a class, but I'm only doing one of them before January. So it's going to be a limited audience. So if you're interested in being a part of that, shoot me an email. And from my experience with communicating with Mark, you must bold the title and put all capitals shared parenting, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yeah, otherwise, thanks so much. Because I normally average at least 600 to 1,000 emails a day. And unfortunately, if I spent 1 minute per email, it would take me 13 hours. So 80% of my emails will never be opened if they don't have shared parenting in all caps in the subject line. And just a caution, I've known Mark for 4 years, but only in person 3 months. 4 years, their emails were all going one direction. And since I had a chance to meet him at one of his conferences, now we have I get that a lot. And like I said, I apologize in advance if people have been trying to get a hold of me. When I look at my private messages, my text, we're talking easily a couple thousand a day. So I'm never avoiding anybody. I love working with people. I just don't have enough time in the day usually. And the one more thing is make sure you thank Levi for sharing his Sunday morning, sharing you with us on his Sunday morning. So tell him dude, he snuck by here from his bedroom a couple times, crawling on the floor so he wouldn't interrupt me. All right. Mark, thanks again. And we're going to go back to Joni now. Have a great day, man. Thanks.